Saturday, May 4th is the official date of the general election here in Leander, Texas. The office of mayor, as well as the council positions for Place 2, Place 4, and Place 6 will be on the ballot. On this episode, I had the opportunity to sit down with current mayor Christine DeLisle. We spoke on a number of things I think that you will find both interesting and informative. This is Lean in Leander. All right, so we are here at Fifth Element Brewing. Mike Brunet was very kind in allowing me to do this here, and hopefully this will be our location for all of the Vote in Leander series. And I am here with Madame Mayor, Christine DeLisle, and we're going to chat a little bit about where you are, where you've been, and where you're going. How about that?
Sure.
Okay. So for the uninitiated, you and I, you can go back, I think it's episode 17. I can't remember exactly which one it is, but you and I had an interview back when you were running for mayor 3 years ago.
Yeah.
At that time, you were on council. You had served, I think, one term, right?
One term of 3 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you'd served one term as a council member. You ran for mayor. Obviously, you won. Now you're the incumbent mayor, and you're up for re-election. We talked a little bit before we started filming. I know we haven't filed yet, but you are running, right?
I am going to run again this year.
All right. So breaking news. All right. So from that perspective, I want to kind of touch on a couple of things that we touched on when we talked before to help people kind of get a better flavor of you, because that's kind of what I try to do. And there's a lot of new people in town, as we're both well aware. So let's give them a little bit of a shorthand version of your origin story. You are originally from California.
Yes.
All right.
Like most Leandrians, I came from somewhere else.
You said almost the exact same thing 2 years ago.
Did I really?
You did. But yeah, it's true though. It's true.
And
yeah.
I think it makes us very friendly because we're all used to being the new person.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, again, we talked a little bit about population growth last time, and I don't want to get sidetracked with that kind of stuff. But it was the Oakland area, right?
Yes.
All right. So California, at the time we talked a couple years ago, you had been here 10 or 11 years at that point?
Probably about that, yeah.
All right.
Because this is my 14th year.
All right, so there we go. So 14 years in Leander, and of the 14 years, I think this is an important little factoid from a data perspective, of the 14 years, about half, just shy of half of your 14 years in Leander, you've served in some capacity on council.
I never thought of it that way.
But yeah. That's exactly what it is. It's 6 years out of 14, right? So it's almost half.
Yeah.
So let's say 45%.
Yeah.
All right. So you've spent a lot of time obviously involved in Leander, representing the people of Leander, and then over the last 3 years serving in a more of a leadership role from the perspective of the council as mayor. Okay. I wanted to ask you, well, before I do that, let's talk a little bit about what you do outside of that, because it's important for us to always remind people that anyone who serves on council in any capacity in Leander, it's essentially a volunteer position.
Yeah, it is an unpaid position.
So you're doing this out of the graciousness of your heart.
Pro bono. Yes.
Pro bono. So I always like to mention that because I want to make sure that, again, anybody who's uninitiated in Leander and doesn't understand, maybe even Texas, how we work, again, it's a volunteer position essentially.
Yeah.
You spend your time on council. It's a 3-year term, right? So again, that would equal the 6 that you've spent there so far. So you have a real life outside of that. You do normal things and make money just like everybody else. So last time we talked, you were involved in digital marketing. You were telling me you've kind of backed away from doing that full time and more of on a consultant basis now?
Yeah, I'm just picking up little consulting things here and there, coming up with little plans, how to market things, stuff like that. But it's definitely taken a bit of a back seat. I was fortunate since the last time that we met. I sold my house and the market was very good, and I merged households, and so I've been able to afford to take a little bit of a break-ish, so I don't have to
working.
Yes, exactly. And so it's allowed me to focus more on my family and the kids growing up, and of course this. And I'm sure, we have so many things to talk about today because this has been an intense time for the city, especially the last few months. So it's been a blessing.
No, for sure, for sure. And again, for those who are uninitiated, what I've done over the past few years is I've been involved on several committees and things of that nature. So I try to keep myself informed of what's happening in the city to help with these conversations primarily, to be honest, because I look at what I do here with the podcast to help people understand a little bit more context of what's happening in the city and the people who are kind of driving some of those conversations. So again, I appreciate you coming and sitting with me again. It's nice to kick off this season's Vote in Leander with you. All right, so last time we talked, we had some conversations about your involvement with a lot of municipal leagues, for lack of better terms, okay?
Yes.
Just like that was something that you spent a lot of time doing and kind of educating yourself as to the operational process, I think, of city governance and whatnot. You were on CAPCOG at that time, which is what was the acronym again?
Capital Area Council of Governments.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, and I believe you were serving on the executive committee there as well.
Yes.
So we were talking a little bit earlier. You've kind of stepped away from that, but you've done some new things. So the Texas Municipal League. Let's talk a little bit about that. Like the Texas Municipal League. What are you doing with that?
So Texas Municipal League is an organization that puts together trainings, and they have basically a lot of the cities in Texas join them, and we have our annual conference. We have trainings, networking, and we also have a lobbying arm. And so all of that allows us to sort of see what other cities are doing and work on not reinventing the wheel, right? So if somebody has figured out how to do something better, then they teach the rest of us how to do something better. And so I've always been involved because you want to continuously improve and know all the things. But I am currently our board representative to the state for our region, and so that's been really interesting, especially through the legislative session, to be able to get a lot of updates about the bills that are in progress and how it's going to impact us and how different cities are looking at things and challenging things, and it's been fascinating. And then recently I was appointed as the chair of our governance committee, so I get to nerd out on more policy.
And if you really want to know how nerdy Christine can get, just go back to the previous episode. She nerds out big time on all of this stuff.
I love policy.
It's interesting, and it's, I think, one of the things that for me, and I don't know how much other candidates or other people on council necessarily involve themselves in those arenas. I thought it was always unique that you were doing that, and I was like, that's an interesting way to approach what can be some of the challenges in that process, because a lot of times people are very opinionated about what is happening in the city and how things are happening, even in our town, even in Leander. Obviously, that extends to the larger cities, Austin being the main hub for a lot of the stuff that gets talked about. It's interesting that you're serving on that particular committee with the municipal league, because you talked about lessons learned from other cities. Mm-hmm. You mentioned to me off camera that it's like Waco and what's the region?
Our region is enormous. It goes up to Waco and down a little past Bastrop and all the way out to like Bryan College Station. Like it's an enormous region that we cover.
So from a mix of municipalities that are within that group, what's the mix, big city to smaller concerns?
I would say a lot of the cities are about where we are. Okay. The ones that are really active. You've got the smaller ones, so TML actually has sort of a separate group for small cities, because small cities have their own unique challenges and things that we don't really identify with. So I feel like the small cities kind of have their own network, and so I don't really know a whole lot that goes on with them. And then the larger cities like Austin is not super involved in our region. I don't think I've ever seen an Austin council member at any of our meetings, but for the board, for the state, they do have, like all of the large cities have like a standing, like person that is on them. That doesn't represent the region, they represent that city. So I saw Kirk Watson at a meeting last year that we had in Austin. But the larger cities, surprisingly, some of them do not seem to be as involved. So in our region, it's a lot of us, Round Rock, Bastrop, Cedar Park, Pflugerville. We seem to be a lot of the ones that congregate here.
So conducive to where we are from a growth perspective. I mean, all of the cities that you mentioned are all here essentially in Central Texas, and all experiencing similar pressures on infrastructure, on population growth, on, natural resources, transportation, just all. They're similar. They're not the same for everybody.
Definitely.
Everybody's got different ways of approaching things. And I know a lot of times what we deal here with in Leander is unique to Leander. There's a few things that contribute to that, but without going into those details. So that's interesting. That's good. I think it's good that the public know that you have that type of involvement. I don't know how well that is known by most. I mean, I think a few people, the nerds, the city nerds like us, we know. But outside of that, someone who is going to be walking into the polling places in May, right? It's May? Yeah. It seems fast.
First Saturday in May.
Right, that's crazy. But so when people are walking in and they're placing their vote, or if they go in early, whatever, it's good that you know this. That's what I'm trying to do, is kind of suss out some of those underlying details, all right?
I will say, even, with our staff, a lot of times my first question on things is this what we do in other cities? Is this how Cedar Park does whatever it is that we're looking at? Because you don't know, unless you talk to other people, you don't know if you're doing something in the best way or the most efficient way. And I feel like we get into our little silos of each city and don't always look around to see if there's a better way to do something. And one of the other things that I've learned from TML is, I feel like we're always talking about Leander and the water, and it seems like it's this huge, horrible thing. And then I talk to people from other cities, and I realize our problems are so small. Right? There are a lot of cities in this state and even in this region that they are dealing with so much. And our water concerns are not nearly as bad as a lot of the water concerns north of us. The further you get away from Lake Travis, that becomes so dire.
That logistically makes sense. I mean, I would imagine that would be the case.
When you talk about those small cities, they don't have the funding for that stuff either.
Right.
We at least have everything in the works. We have the funding.
So let's segue a little bit there. Let's talk about the water, because it's typically one of the main things that people talk about. Okay. At least number two. I mean, I don't know. It just depends on who you talk to. But anyway,
it's about to be.
It's one of the. That's why I'm framing it, because we're about to go into stage 4 again.
We are.
And the last time we were in stage 4, if I remember correctly, I think it was in the early spring or late fall, right?
It was September of 22.
Okay, so it was timed well, which I think, again, here, it's never ideal.
Right.
It's never ideal, okay? Yeah. But we're in the winter months. People aren't watering their yards. There's not necessarily as much consumption per se. People aren't trying to overcome drought conditions.
Right.
Although we are in a drought, but, technically. So what should people expect with that? Like, what are the impacts?
Really, if they just stop watering their yards, we know that everything will be fine. We've done this before. We just want you to be conscious of the water that you're using, because what happens is we have to shut down the pipeline to do a replacement of a piece of it. And so that makes us rely on just one plant. And that plant is undergoing expansion, but it's not fully expanded yet. And so we just have to be very careful that we don't run that plant dry, essentially, because that throws off the pressures. It puts everybody into a boil water notice that's going to last a few days. Like, it's detrimental.
So the process itself, we've been undergoing this for a few years. And like when you and I talked a couple of years ago, again, it was very much one of the top topics of the day at that point. A lot of that due to, I want to shy away from using the word neglect necessarily, but I think that there was not enough impetus put on that particular part of the planning process that previously needed to be done. So we kind of got to that point to where, we went from, I don't know, but let's just say 30,000 people to 80,000 people almost overnight. Yeah. It happened quick, and we just weren't prepared for that.
Absolutely.
I think that's a fair way to talk, right?
Absolutely.
So now we've spent the last, let's say, 3-4 years-ish, kind of trying to make up for lost time, right? Is that a fair way of framing it?
Yes.
Okay. So in that, help us understand what was in process, what has changed about that process, and with this current thing that we're doing with the pipe and making it deeper and changing, I mean, it's probably 900 years old, probably putting in new pipe. How is that going to change things for us going forward?
Sure. Okay, so that was a lot.
I know,
lot
sorry.
more questions. Let me see if I can address all of it. So, yes, I feel like previously the city was sort of building the plane as they flew it. There were not a whole lot of plans for our growth. We knew we had growth, but we weren't tracking it. We weren't doing anything to slow it down. I remember when I first got on council in 2018, the advice that we were receiving from our previous city manager and staff is you want more users on your water system because more users help to pay for upgrades in the future. But there was no tracking of who those users were, like how much water was being used, how many new users were there. And that's where we got into trouble back in around 2017. And so what we've done in the last 3 years is we've slowed down the growth. And everybody looks around and says, why are you still building? We can't stop the construction. We can't stop the building. That's a state law. We have to actually be out of water before we're allowed to put on a moratorium. And it's ridiculous, but it is what it is. And so what we've done is we've worked within the confines to slow down the growth that we have. We're prioritizing commercial. It's a little bit more difficult to build here if you want to build houses. And you're going to have to donate a lot more parkland. You're going to have to pay more into the roads because we know that all the roads need to be widened. And so it's given our staff a break where they can really look at the usage of everything and the projections and growth and make sure that we are doing everything in a way that's going to be sustaining and that we're putting all of this water infrastructure into place. And so now I think we have something like 17 projects going between new water towers and expansions at both of our water treatment plants. So we've got all these things happening that each one increases our capacity, but they all just take time. There's no way to do it as quickly as we would like. So with our projections, 2027 is where we're sitting pretty. We've got the rights to more water out of the lake from LCRA. We've got expansion going on at both of the plants. We've got efficiencies going into both of the plants. We've got all these extra water towers, all these redundancies in the system. And so once that last piece, that deep water intake, is online in 2027, we're golden. And it's just going to be a matter of getting through until then.
So with the deep water intake, which is what they're working on right now,
yes,
is it fair to say, hey folks, be prepared for at least another stage 4 at some point because that work needs to continue? Or is this the last time that the work that they're doing on the deep water intake will disrupt what we do day to day? I know that's maybe a harder question, but
it is a harder question, and we're not really sure. So if you go back and watch from when we're filming this, our last council meeting, that was sort of a question that we posited to staff is, what are the expectations? And our staff really shies away from saying, we don't have to expect it because you don't know if there's going to be an emergency, right? You don't know if something's going to break or something's going to go wrong. But what we're trying to find out is, as these systems come online, is there another time we're going to be shutting down? And so I personally don't have that answer right now, but It is something that I think is going to be a part of our messaging. And I've made it clear to our staff, like, this is what we need to tell people. We need to tell people what to expect and when. And I think we all understand emergencies can happen. Outside of those emergencies, when can we expect this to ever happen again? Can we expect it to happen again? But it'll definitely happen this spring. And hopefully, if it happens again, it won't be for a while. But we do need to be good stewards of the water, and we do need to think in a more environmentally conscious way. And this is just the way of the state of Texas. It seems like it's just Leander right now, but when you look at the state water board, they've put together their projections, and in 20 years, the state is out of water. So this is, in the next few years, this is not just a Leander conversation. This is a regional conversation. It is a state conversation. And so it's something that we have focused on a lot.
Well, and I think to the betterment, to be honest. I mean, that's my personal opinion, and I don't try to do that too often. But in this case, yeah, I think it's a much better scenario looking forward. And again, I think maybe not 100%, but I think we've kind of caught up with the planning part of that.
Yeah.
And there'll be, you know, I mean, there's technologies that are being developed now, and there's a lot of things that you cannot foresee from those particular perspectives. So maybe there's something that you know, that we find in the next 10 years, it changes that equation per se. But I'm glad to see that from the perspective of what this council has done, we're at least looking at it beyond 2025.
Absolutely. Thank you. And we've done a few other things to promote conservation. So we already have Purple Pipe, which is a reuse for non-potable water irrigation. We already have that up at the golf course and through Treviso. We're expanding that to be out around Horizon Lake and Northline. All of that development is going to get Purple Pipe over there as well. And then we've hired our first conservationist, and he focuses entirely on how to make things more efficient, how to help people. And so he goes out and he does irrigation assessments for free for residents and helps them figure out how much watering they need to do, find leaks in the system, things like that. We've adjusted our ordinances, so new things that are coming online, that are being built, they don't have to have as much plant life and grass and things as they used to have. And so we're trying to be very forward thinking in what the usage is going to be in the future, and to not have as much demand per user as we've had in the past. Good.
It's a lot of water stuff.
It is a lot of water stuff. We talk about water a lot.
So that kind of leads me in a sense to my next question, which was, we talked a little bit about trends in governance last time that we met. And so from a trending perspective, using that as a framing device, what would you say, from your experience, the trends in local governance have been? How have they changed? Like you've been on council for 6 years. If you look back at what you thought was happening 6 years ago compared to what you think is happening now, what's changed trend-wise? Like how is it different now?
I'm not sure if I fully understand the question, or if
locally
it's changed.
So let's just say
Leander?
just within Leander, yeah, like from a governance perspective, Leander and the way that we approach our problems and our solutions, has that changed over the last 6 years, or has that maintained kind of the same approach, just with better planning? I mean,
I think it's mostly better planning, but also there's a lot more regionalism that goes on. We do talk to the cities around us. We talk to our partners, and we really try and help them. And so like with Georgetown and their water issues, our staff has assisted them in looking at their infrastructure and saying, well, you can put a pump here, you can do this, you can do that. We're having some talks with Liberty Hill as well. And we go out and we seek information from our partners as well, and just ask for help. So I think a lot of the issues in this area are regional. They're not just city by city. And so our staffs are great at talking to each other. Our local officials are talking to each other. And so I think there's more of a regional approach, but honestly, I'm not exactly sure where we were 6 years ago. I know compared to 3 years ago, we are very much more communicative.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That's fair. That's fair.
I think it changes with different people.
Agreed. And speaking of different people, it's not in order here, but it's fine. I'm flexible. I've been tracking, and for those who watch the podcast or listen to the podcast, they'll know that I've done a couple of episodes where I've talked about our process right now in that change management. Yes. With the city manager position. I talked a little bit about, over a couple of episodes, what's going on with that. So I know that there was a consultancy that the city chose to work with, which is interesting. because I don't know if that's happened before for previous city manager hires. So it was one of my questions that I wanted to ask you. Have we ever done that again? Have we ever done that before?
I believe several years ago, before I was on council, we did that.
Okay, so that's not unusual. It's just you chose to do it this time.
Normally, councils will go with a consultancy that has experience, because you get it's a delicate process, because the people that are applying typically have a job somewhere else,
right.
and they want to know that they're applying somewhere where if they don't get it, they don't get outed to their council of, hey, your city manager is looking for a job.
Right.
So it's very delicate, and you want to have an organization that is reputable, that the applicants can trust.
So it's SGR.
SGR.
And I've kind of highlighted a little bit of that. But one of the things that I thought was really good in that process is this document that was created.
I love this.
It's a brochure, essentially, for Leander.
Yeah.
And I covered it in a previous episode, and I was talking about how, from my perspective, it was really just me, but how I felt that this was a really good and clear definition of what was being done, what to expect, and what I felt, this was my impression, what I felt the council was saying they want in a city manager, right?
Yes, very much so.
So, again, we were talking a little bit off camera beforehand. You mentioned that you had a lot of input into this the council, I shouldn't say you, not you specifically, but the council had a lot of input into this brochure. And I know that there's some restrictions on what you can talk about as far as the city manager is concerned. So to just bring people up to speed, at this point, you have received from SGR, right?
Yes.
Candidates that you are now vetting on council based on the recommendations coming from the from SGR. They've kind of vetted them. They've whittled it down. Now you're down to the last few, right?
We whittled it down.
You whittled it down.
We whittled it down.
Okay.
So it's been a really interesting process. So originally, SGR, our headhunter, basically, he said, a lot of councils, they just have a couple of people that do this as like a committee, and then they just bring the recommendations at the end to council. And I told him, there's no way this council is going to want to do that. This council, every single person, if I ask, who wants to be on the committee for this, they are all going to raise their hand. And our consultant was like, well, that might be a little chaotic. And I was like, we got this. Right. And sure enough, I am so proud of our council, because we are so united on what we're looking for. And at every single turn, we are seeing the same things. We are having the same feedback. We all are coalescing around the same ideas. We all independently, without realizing in the beginning, want the exact same things. And so when SGR first gave us the brochure, we all looked at it and we were like, this is not our city. And so we changed a whole bunch that was in there, and everybody had their input. We cut out pieces, we added in new pieces. And so I think we're probably all really proud of that brochure, because it's how we see the city. And I thought that was really phenomenal. And I know that that's something we're doing that other councils aren't doing. So very proud.
Yeah. And kudos on that. Again, from my perspective, a little bit closer to the drumbeat, I'm not uninitiated.
Yeah.
I thought it was really interesting. It struck me. I was really struck by that, because I had looked at SGR and what they had done brochure-wise for some other cities. Mm-hmm. So I was really, really curious. I was like, all right, some of these really read like a marketing piece. Mm-hmm. Some of these read more of like an origin story. It's just like all sorts of different mixes of how they were representing the cities. And I felt, okay, these are probably some sort of reflection of that individual city. But to hear you tell it, it was more like, no, this is kind of what SGR put together. And I don't know about the other cities. I don't want to speak to that. But, to me, I looked at some of those and I was like, I don't know if that's really what that city is about, Yeah. So when I read Leander's, I was like, okay, this is really, really cool, because there's little things in here that I think, again, if I think maybe if you're a little bit more geeky on the city stuff, maybe that appeals to you. But just to understand, Leander's annual budget is $317 million. I have been looking for this number for years and not really been able to find it. Like, not clearly enunciated, like, here is what it is. Like, yes, I can go through the budget and I can figure all that out and I can kind of break all that stuff down. But just for like just Joe Blow average guy, like, who's going to do that? Not too many people. So I struggled to find this anywhere. And now here it is in this one document, which kind of is like, all right, cool. This now kind of sets the tone, or at least sets the plate. All right, so you're dealing with a city manager who's going to come in and he's going to be dealing with a $317 million budget, right? Yeah. Great, now I know, all right? That's kind of where I'm going with that. But more to the point, the way that you outline the position, and I spent some time on this, I don't get too long on this, but I thought it was very, very direct. And one of the things that I have, and it's a personal complaint, I guess, I'll frame it that I want to be fair to everybody. I've always felt that our city managers are a little bit too behind the scenes.
Yes.
Like, you don't know who they are.
We agree.
They're there, and you see them from time to time, but they are really the person from the way that we're structured that is responsible for the operator, the COO of the city. Like, they are the chief operational officer. Absolutely. And that person typically is a little bit more like, you see them, you know what they talk to people, they do interviews or whatever it might be. You just I have not in my lifetime here in Leander, which is about the same as long as you've been serving on council. I've never seen that. And I know who they are. Don't get me wrong. I know who they are, and I've met them.
Because you're involved.
Right, because I'm involved. But that's what I mean by that. Like, I try to take the common man's perspective on that. I'm like, all right, well, the leadership of the city, the elected officials, get the brunt of the dissatisfaction or satisfaction. You guys get all the accolades and you get all the grumbling, right? Yeah. But it's representative, and you're limited on council as to what you do. Essentially, on council, it's budget and ordinances. I mean, if you want to really boil it down to the two things, right?
We give the direction,
right? And
but
that's
it is up to the city manager to
how they do that. Right,
yes.
Right. So it's directional, but it's not like there is like you as Madam Mayor don't sit there and say, no, I'm going to veto this thing and we're going to do something else. It's not how it works.
Cannot do that. No.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So just to clarify for people who may not know that.
A lot of people don't know that.
And they don't.
And I joke about that. I'm like, on my off time, I'm personally holding that pipeline together.
Right.
Because, a lot of people think that everything that goes on in the city is the responsibility of mayor and council. Even just, the businesses that come here. This business came here because council invited them. Like, no, like, anybody can open a business. And so, I think there are a lot of misnomers. And that city manager position is so vital and so important.
Especially right now. Yes. Because we are, as a city, at a very important juncture in our growth process. So you kind of outlined it earlier, and it's a decision, I think. It's a decision that I believe the city has taken. So we talk about this, and again, I've been on several committees and we've talked about this before. Do we want to be a bedroom community? Do we want to do this? Do we want to do that? Well, I've always taken the position that, like, hey guys, you can't have that conversation anymore. That's passed you by. We're not a bedroom community. We can't afford to be a bedroom community anymore. We need to develop more of our economic diversity in order to have long-term stability. Otherwise, you end up too much in one place, and it's you've got a three-legged stool with one leg that's it's shorter than the others, right?
Well, and you have the risk when you're a bedroom community of, if the market goes poorly, you're just out of all your money. But when the market is well, you're just putting all of the burden for financing everything on homeowners. Right. And that's not a place that you want to be in either. Especially in Texas, with the current environments that we live in, and everybody's looking at it and saying, I want to lower my property taxes. I mean, that's a common theme for everybody, right? So that's great. And, hey, I'm a normal,
red-blooded American. If you're going to make me pay less, then I'm fine with that, okay?
We try.
And I know, but at the same time, I also say, well, but that's how you pay for all the other stuff, right? So it's a balance.
Yeah.
And again, to the point, that much investment in the bedroom community, again, you're reliant on property taxes if something changes there. And a lot of that you have no control over at a city level, because the legislature makes decisions in Texas that completely change the paradigm, and you have to live with it, right?
Or if there's a crash in the economy, people lose their jobs, the real estate market comes down, we have no control over that. That is out of our hands. And so, that would be very risky. So,
right.
You've got to have that economic diversity.
So part of that diversity that we talked about this the last time too, we had the North Line development, which is obviously a little bit further along, but still has a ways to go, because that's just how that works. Yeah. There's the new, I think it's light industrial structure going on
Hero Way West?
On Hero Way,
yes.
Right? So that was a really nice project from that perspective. I don't know if Kat likes that in her backyard necessarily, but
I haven't heard anything.
Well, it's right there. But yeah, no,
there's
that's
setbacks. Though.
Yeah, no, there
so
are. I'm being facetious. It's not in her backyard. And so the land next to that is now available or up for sale. So I could imagine that that's going to be. And I've always looked at this side of Hero, as like, okay, that's probably what we're going to get here. We're going to get a little bit of a commercial corridor here. I like the direction that we're going there. I had the privilege of serving on the Economic Development Committee for the last few years.
As the chair.
It was a little chaotic, to be honest with you. I mean, because we were dealing with trying to kind of figure out how that committee could work. So hopefully I left it in a good place.
You did.
And you know.
And we appreciate your time.
Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah.
But now I'm free to do all sorts of really crazy stuff. But again, like those commitments to that long-term economic development, one of the things that I wanted to talk about was like the vision now.
Sure.
So the vision for Leander going forward. Now, obviously, you've had an opportunity to put your thumb on the scale for the last 3 years. Where do you see that, if reelected, where do you see that going?
I think it's going to continue on in the trend that we're going with, where we're getting this diverse grouping of different industries, right? So I called this last year that we just had the most well-rounded year in economic development for the city, because we have Class A office space that's going in over at Northline. We've got Class A industrial at Hero Way West. We've never had anything like either of those projects, and those bring in such different users than what we're used to. And then at the same time, we have all these shopping centers popping up all over the place that's bringing in more retail, more restaurants, all the things that we always said we want to have. And so it's going to be fantastic. Each of those Class A projects is a catalyst. You know, you talked about the land next door to Hero Way West being for sale. Well, now that's going to look more attractive to somebody because there's something there. That also means there's more infrastructure in each of the areas where these things are going in. In the next year, you're going to see Crystal Village going vertical. You're going to see more of Northline going vertical. We've been in meetings recently about the commercial aspect of that, and the holdup right now in that is that there's just a shift in plans, and the shift is very, very good. So that's going to be phenomenal. We've also got, I think a lot of people that have been in Leander for a long time don't realize if you go out to 29 and Reagan, that's still Leander. There's a brand new H-E-B shopping center there that is just popping full of things. And you'll see the announcements in community impact, and sometimes they list it as Georgetown. It's Leander. The post office determines.
Right? No, it's crazy. It's in Leander. This came up. It's in Leander. The address is Georgetown, and the school district is Liberty Hill, if I remember correctly. So that's crazy. It's just that one piece of land.
But
so everybody can claim it.
Taxes,
right? They all come to Leander. That's the most important piece.
Cannot claim
right. So that's the important piece. And again,
it's predominantly serving our residents that live out on Reagan. And Reagan, to our residents that have lived here for the last 15 years, go drive up and down Reagan. We encouraged Cap Metro about 2 years ago. when they got some new people in, I was telling them, because I've been trying to get them to expand out the pickup service because it's fantastic and more people need to be able to access it. And that it lies entirely with Cab Metro. And so we just try and persuade them. And I was telling them, and I said, this Reagan corridor, y'all don't even go out there. There's not just a lot of people. There's all this commercial. There's shops. There's places for people to work that you should be. And it was new to them because the last time that they were out here, when they were working on the pickup service, there wasn't a whole lot of commercial out there.
Mm-hmm.
When they first came to Leander, there was nothing out there. I don't think that was even annexed in when they were first here. And so they drove up and down it, and it's very different from how it was 10 years ago.
No, it's very different from how it was 5 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, because essentially in the 5-6 years that I've been here, I've seen all of that happen. And it's, it's funny because a lot of people say, oh, we need this, we need that. And you would hear and see on social media, hey, how come we don't have this store? And how come we don't have this place? And why don't we have a Torchy's Taco and whatever,
we do
blah,
now.
blah, blah. We do now. So we have all of that stuff. A lot of that will come anyway. But if there's not some sort of conducive planning to that, right? It's harder.
Yes.
So there'll be people who listen to this and they'll say, well, you're making it harder for developers to do things. And I think we want to specify that, well, yes, but that's on purpose because we want to slow the residential growth.
We're making it harder on residential.
That's why I'm saying that. I was like, it's the
Yeah.
residential growth that we want to kind of just tap the brakes. It's going to happen anyway, right? It's going to happen. It's just like we don't want to necessarily just blow through that process. But at the same time, I know, again, from what I did while we were on the development committee, the commercial focus and getting the right type of commercial properties interested in the city of Leander and using what other development is going on in the region to identify who those people are.
Absolutely.
So, I think it's great that we're building the type of infrastructure for that. We're not going to see it right away. I think it's still another 3 to 5 years off before we start seeing it and it's visible. It's the same thing if you drive, by the HEB Center, if you drive by the HEB Center and in that Cedar Park, but all of that development there, I mean, Firefly has been there for a number of years, okay? They only put up signage in like the last 2. And now, granted, they only got rockets that were working in the last 2 years. But that's kind of the thing that you have to wait for. Like, it doesn't happen overnight. And
that's true.
Then it becomes visible. So I think what I'm saying is that there's a lot that's going on that people can't see that they will see in the next few years, right?
That's true, yes. And I think a lot of that they're going to see just in the next year. So Hero Way West, even though they just broke ground, they're anticipating opening Q4 of this year. Home Depot has not yet broken ground, but they are saying they're on track to open fall or winter of this year. I'm so hopeful for that. I'm so excited to have them coming. And we know that Home Depot is going to be a catalyst because anytime you see a Home Depot, there's always a shopping center around it that has lots of things. And so, something will pop up there. And then Crystal Village has a number of places under contract. I'm not sure what they've announced and what they haven't, so I don't want to go into that. But they have a number of places that are under contract that are just waiting for the buildings to be built. And so I'm pretty sure they're done with all of their infrastructure, or they're close to being done. It looks pretty ready over there. And so I think this year we'll see some of that popping up too. So yes, some of these things take a long time, but also we're right at the cusp where some of these are going to be vertical in the next 12 months and you're going to see it.
Right. So what started us down this path was the city manager, and you're now at the point to where let's say you've identified 6 candidates. I don't know if you can say how many there are.
I'm not going to say how many.
Okay, but let's say it's
We've whittled it down twice.
Okay, so it's less than 20, more than 1.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So at what point does that become a more public? Is it after the hire process is completed? Or is there ever an opportunity, and this kind of goes to what I was asking, is there ever an opportunity for the citizenry to see these are the people that we're looking at? Or is that not how it works?
That is up to every council. We spoke about it recently, and we don't want to be very public about it because the last time we were hiring a city manager, the name was announced too soon, and that person was a superstar, and he ended up backing out because he hadn't yet talked to his council. Some cities, they are very public about it. I know Hutto had like their last 3 city managers, like candidates, all come and do a panel, and it was videoed. And I don't know how the 2 that don't get chosen like work with their councils, right? And so we aren't trying to keep anything away from people, but we are trying to keep the process very sacred and not lose our finalists, because our finalists are all stars. They are amazing. And we know that the public is going to adore any one of them. But it's just one of those things where it's sacred. It's our baby. I'm not sure when we're going to announce, if it's going to be like a few finalists or if it's just going to be one. That's a discussion for the future. But currently, it is sacred.
And that's fair. I can respect that. And having, even just in your own personal, experience going through an interview process, you're like, hey, don't call my current employer, right? It's kind of one of those things. So that's fair, and I appreciate you at least addressing it from that perspective. Where was I going with that? I lost my train of thought. Okay, anyway, all right. So we've talked about a lot, and we're almost at an hour, which is crazy. I don't know how much this is actually going to make it into the edit. I'll have to probably trim it down a little bit. I think we've kind of hit on everything overall. Staffing plans from the perspective of the city manager are, once that position is filled, then those specifics become the one of the functions of the city manager, right? Right. So are there any plans to expand the staff? Because I know that one of the things that's been, I don't want to say a hindrance, but it's been a challenge, has been staffing issues. Like there's just not enough people to do the things that need to be done.
There's not enough money to have all of the people. Yes.
So it goes back to budget at the end of the day.
It does. And so one of the things, this is a part of the big controversy about Cap Metro, is being in a transportation district. Half of what we would normally collect of sales tax goes off the top straight to Cap Metro. And we can't relitigate that. The legislature puts limits on how often you can bring that to a vote. So we have to work within that and try and change the legislature to change the way that these things are funded, because it can hinder cities like ours. And so when you look at staffing for our city versus similar cities in the area, we run lean, and we run lean because we're working with less. And it's unfortunate, but it is what it is. So there's always more demand for staffing than we have the ability.
So when you talk about staffing and whatnot, and I don't want to get too deep into this, but it's an interesting question for me, because I look at that and say, all right, well, there are theories, or there are, how do I put this? There are schools of thought that you run lean, you have the right people, and you leverage technology to expand their capabilities. Like you make a technology investment.
Yes.
Then there's other people who say, no, you need the people. The people are what gets the job done, and they kind of expand on the number of people. Neither one is right or wrong. It's just 2 different ways of doing things. But because of the way that we have to do things, I'd ask the question, how much of a technology investment has the City of Leander been making? I mean, and are we restricted in that because we're putting all our money into fixing the waters?
So that is something that I think we've actually done a fantastic job of, is keeping our IT team staffed with lots of people, and they're all top notch. And it's been incredible too, because the city managers I've worked with have not been super technological, right? Spoken as a millennial, right? It's very like, okay, let me help my dad with this, right? And so it's been great though that they understand the importance of IT, and they're like, I don't understand what you do, but you do you, and so that has been fantastic. We've made a number of good security choices, and I see that all the time when I talk about meeting with officials from other cities, and we have problems with the lowercase p. They have problems with an uppercase p. And one of the cities that I was talking to a couple of their officials from last year, they were telling me how they had just redone their entire IT infrastructure because they had a ransomware thing that happened, and it took down everything, and they weren't able to get anything back. And they had, I guess this is a thing for smaller cities, remember they have their different issues, they like outsource IT, and there's people that specialize in that. And so these guys were telling me, I don't know who you use for IT, but don't use this company. And I was like, you have a company? Like, we just have people, and they're just, they stay on top of all the things. But yeah, we've definitely invested in very good forward-thinking IT people that make sure that everything is very secure. It's like Fort Knox to get in there. It's where all the servers are and everything, but it's very controlled, and they're very smart.
Good. And I think the website that project finally got done,
so I was thinking about that when you were talking about the budget, because we do post the budget on the website, the whole budget book, and it does list the number in there on like a little letter in the front that kind of introduces the budget book, and then it gets into all of the things, right? But I wanted to say that is easier to find now on our brand new website that you can use on mobile, all the things. There's a newsletter. Everything.
No, I'm taking advantage of a lot of that stuff. When you talk about that kind of stuff, I always have my opinions, but it's a huge improvement. It's a huge improvement,
and it's still being worked on.
Yeah, you can tell. Trust me, I know. From my perspective, I can tell. It's all right. You're still working out some kinks, and that's okay.
Every so often, you have to call up and say like, I can't find where this is, and they're like, oh, oops, let's migrate that over, because some things just didn't migrate, and then links have different names, some of them, and they have to go in and re-add them. And so that's one of those things that is very specific to municipalities too. Like, you can't just build your own website because they have to follow all of these different regulations, and so everybody uses different contractors, and so you're like confined to their ecosystem. And so it's been weird, but it's so much better than it used to be. I kind of miss the old search that we used to have, though, because you would go to the search bar for years and you would type in something completely coherent and it would come back with just random words. And I used to say it was like some sociology experiment, like how frustrated can you get somebody before they quit? Because you'd look for like Reagan zoning, and it would come back and it was like, did you mean wombats at HEB? like what is this? Like, this has nothing to do with anything.
So it was anti-chat GPT, right?
It was the total opposite. It was so funny. It was frustrating. But in hindsight, we can laugh about it.
No, it's actually,
search works.
Like I said, it's a huge improvement, and a lot of that is due to the work of council, and then
we pushed for that.
It was a big thing for a long time. I remember. Have you stood up all your campaign stuff at this point, or is that?
Oh, I haven't even filed.
Okay, no. All right. So
there's still a few weeks.
There's still a few weeks.
I'm in no rush.
But you're running.
Yeah.
And let's see, what did you use last time? Vote for Christine, I think it was.
It was a leader who listens.
A leader who listens. Well, in my experience, you have done a very good job of that.
Thank you.
And I appreciate you taking some time to help the people who watch this and listen to this, listen to what it is that you have to say. Because it's nice to be able to have this type of opportunity, and it's one of the things that a small town can afford you is these types of opportunities. Once you get too big, can't do it anymore.
Yeah.
But I guess that's our signal.
Oh.
No, I think the battery's ready now. Anyway, thanks again. And for those of you, as we get closer to the election, I'll continue to post information both on the Lean in Leander website and the accompanying Vote in Leander website with all the proper links so you can look at all of the various candidates who are running. I wish you nothing but luck in your attempt to be re-elected. And again, I thank you for your time. It's very, very nice of you.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, guys. That's it for today.